Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Happy New Year everyone! Depending on when you're listening to this, it's either just about to arrive or it has just passed. I hope you're all doing well and ready for another year of terrifying, mysterious, and often baffling stories from the Japanese internet. To kick this year off, we're diving into some strange and bizarre encounters with the supernatural. Things that shouldn't be. Things that don't make sense. Yet, there they are, right in front of you, whether you like it or not. So, you best be ready for what's about to come. For our first story, we're taking a drive up into the mountains. You've no doubt heard of the yokai Yamabozu, the giant black blob that appears in the water to sink ships. Well, what would you do if you happened across something scarily similar up in the mountains? Find out how these two friends deal with such an encounter in Yamabozu. I was on my way home from visiting a friend in Chino. It must have been around 11 p.m, and I passed through Kofu and was driving along Karisaka Road. Another friend who came along was asleep in the passenger's seat, or at least appeared to be, as he sat silently with his head buried. We passed through the long tunnel on the prefectural border, and before long, a figure appeared in the headlights on the side of the road. We were up in the mountains, and they were standing by the edge of a cliff. I was briefly shocked, but I continued driving past. "Did you see that just now?" my friend suddenly said. Seemed he wasn't asleep. I did. Looked like a person. I don't think that person was alive. What on earth was he saying? What are you talking about? Don't say such weird shit. I laughed, but honestly, hearing such a thing while driving along a dark mountain road wasn't helping matters. We drove for a while in silence before my friend piped up again. "Hey, look over there." Another figure stood on the edge of the cliff. As the car headlights shone on them, it looked just like the figure we'd seen earlier. "Hey, don't slow down." Panicked, I slammed my right foot back on the accelerator again. "Don't look at it. Pretend you don't see it." Is that really? I think so. We'll see it again soon too. Another 2 or 3 minutes later, it appeared again. There was no longer any doubting it. As far as I could tell under the light of the headlights, it was the exact same figure once again. "Maybe it's triplets trying to scare drivers on the mountain roads," I said. But even I didn't believe that. Then it appeared again. It couldn't be quadruplets. Hey, don't you think it's strange? Strange? Yeah. It'll probably appear again, so take a closer look. Although, looking too closely might be dangerous. Another 2 or 3 minutes passed, and once again, the figure appeared. Yeah, there was definitely something strange about it, although there was no denying it was the same figure as all the earlier times. Does it intend to keep appearing in front of us until we stop? So, it'll all be over if we stop then? I don't think anything good will happen if we do that. I think we should just keep pretending that we don't see it. But there's definitely something strange about it. Something feels wrong. I'm not very confident myself, but I think it'll all become clear the next time we see it. And the next time the figure appeared, it all made sense. It's getting bigger, huh? It is. It looked to be roughly 2 meters high as we passed it. It most definitely wasn't human. Haha, what is this? We're living in the old days with transforming kitsune and tanuki or something, I said with a dry laugh. I was only able to laugh because my friend was sitting next to me. If I'd been alone, I'd likely have wet myself instead. Look, let's just ignore it for now. I don't think we should get involved with it. The next time it appeared, it had grown close to 3 meters in height. It kept appearing every few minutes, gradually getting bigger and bigger. Honestly, I was so scared I couldn't even speak. It took everything I had to keep the car following the road, my hands gripped tight on the steering wheel. The first time we saw it, it was roughly human-sized. If it kept appearing, then how big would it get? Just thinking about it terrified me. I think my friend felt the exact same way, because by the time we passed it for the 10th time, he stopped speaking. I think it appeared roughly 14 or 15 times and, by the end, was nearly 10 meters tall. We could no longer pretend that we didn't see it. Yet, it suddenly disappeared as the lights of a small village in the distance came into view. 3 minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. And we never saw it again. Looks like it's gone, huh? We got away. I was still anxious, but also somewhat relieved. For the first time in my life, the lights of a nearby vending machine and store signs made me feel safe. As we passed through the small village, we found a parking lot full of vending machines. Both of us were thirsty, so we stopped to get some canned coffee. As we got back into the car, I gradually picked up speed. And as I glanced into the side mirror, I felt like I could see something large, expanding and growing in the darkness of the mountains. When you were younger, was there ever a path or road that your parents warned you not to walk down? Maybe it led to a dangerous area, or perhaps there were unsavory stories surrounding it. Either way, such warnings tend to summon kids like moths to a flame when they're told not to do something, and this is the case with the protagonist of this next story. He and the other neighborhood kids are warned never to use a certain path, yet they're not told why. As such, they ignore the warnings. But as it turns out, there was a very good reason they existed in the first place. Find out why in The Path You Mustn't Walk Down. When I was just a kid, there was this path that my teachers and people from the neighborhood association told us that we must never walk down. There are some stairs near my place, and they reminded me of this story, so let me tell you about it. Like I said just before, I think there are probably lots of schools around that have paths that, for whatever reason, the adults tell kids they mustn't use. Maybe a student did something bad there in the past, or the kids are noisy when they're on their way home, etc. And as for us, there was a set of stairs that we were told we were never allowed to use. These stairs were on the edge of the road, about 100-meter walk from the elementary school. 100 meters in the opposite direction was the junior high. The rest of the area was full of apartments and houses. If you climbed those stairs, you found yourself at the foot of a big park. Depending on where you lived, taking those stairs could cut 10 minutes off your trip. If not, then you had to go the long way around. And so, even though they always warned us not to go that way, few people heeded their warning. Most of the elementary school kids played in that park, and so they used those stairs to get there. And these stairs, they were built strangely. Even now as an adult, if I don't lift my leg really high, I can't reach the next step. The space between each of the steps is so big. When we were kids, that space was just lower than the height from our hips to the ground. But, being kids, we sure enjoyed playing on those stairs. But then at some point, I started to wonder why we weren't allowed to use those stairs. The conclusion my friend and I reached was that it had to be because of the large steps. Because the space between them was so large, the teachers no doubt thought it would be dangerous for us to use them. It was a pretty good answer, or so I thought, but my friends were the only other ones who agreed with me. Still, we continued using those stairs to reach the park every day until we graduated from elementary school. After graduation, we started junior high. I joined the school only 100 meters from those stairs, which meant that if I wanted to reach that school, once again, using those stairs would be the quickest way to get there. And of course, I used them every day. And yet, even as a junior high student, the warnings not to use those stairs continued. I got bigger, and climbing the stairs got easier, but people still told me not to use them. I joined the sports club at school, and so I was always busy with practice, meaning I never noticed, but apparently once school ended, junior high teachers would stand by the stairs every so often, watching those who tried to use them. But it was apparently only once in a while, like once a month at best. And if they caught you trying to use them, they'd stop you and give you a strict warning. Of course, being a junior high student, I was right in the middle of my rebellious phase, and I spent many a night hanging out until late. Pretty much every day I'd hang out at a friend's house until late and then fight with my parents once I finally got home. As I continued this lifestyle, I started attending school less and less as well. I'd ride around on a bike unlicensed, and I guess I became what you might call a delinquent. And it was quicker to reach my friend's house by using those stairs, so even though I stopped going to school, I still used those stairs daily. Because I was always returning home late, that meant I was using those stairs late at night as well. At first, I didn't think much about it. I used them as I always did. But then, during the winter of my second year at junior high, that all changed. I grew frightened of using those stairs. It wasn't like anything happened, nor did I have a bad feeling about them or anything. It's difficult to put into words, but it felt like something was there. Still, I was a kid who no longer went to school and spent all my time riding around unlicensed on a bike, so it wasn't like I was going to tell anyone that I was afraid of the stairs. There was no way I could talk to anyone about it, and I could have stopped using the stairs, but I didn't. It wasn't just because they were the quickest way around. If I stopped using them simply because I felt scared of something I didn't understand, then it was like I was giving in. I was just being stubborn, putting on airs or something, I guess. So then, one day, I ended up alone with the friend I trusted the most. I confided in him about the stairs. He lived in a different area, and so he never used them, so he didn't even know they existed. Perhaps out of interest, he told me that he was going to go and check them out. He got on his bike and rode off, and, embarrassed, all I could do was sit there and wait until he returned. A short while later, he came back and laughed at me. "Huh, what exactly is so scary about them? They're just regular stairs," he said, making fun of me. Sulking, I went straight home. I took those stairs again, and something really did feel different. But if you asked me what, I couldn't tell you. After that day, another half a year passed. I continued using those stairs, even though something felt wrong. But then one day, one of my friends had a bike accident. The rest of us decided to stop screwing around for a while and return to school. But having to use those stairs after school when it was dark really was depressing. Then one day, I finally discovered the real reason why those stairs were so terrifying. I was out late with one of my friends, just chatting, when it passed midnight. I decided it was time to head home and went to use the stairs, but then something from the bottom. I forgot to mention this, but I always went down the stairs on my way home. Meaning, as I looked down from the top of the stairs, I saw 2 young boys coming up them. At first, I was like, what the hell are 2 young kids doing out here so late at night? But I don't know how to describe it. I think it's only something you can understand if you've been through it yourself. But suddenly I realized I was in danger. I don't know if it was instinct or logic or what. This was the reason I was so afraid of the stairs. Next thing I knew, I was running, and I fled to my friend's house. Several guys were still there, so I frantically explained everything to them. "Let's go check it out," one of my friends said. I tried to stop them, but nobody would listen to me. I stayed in the house and watched them all rush out the door. They still didn't believe me, and they probably thought I was lying through my teeth. I waited, but they didn't return. At some point, I fell asleep, and when one of my friends woke me up, it was morning. It was then that I heard that one of the guys fell down the stairs the night before. He explained that they'd all gone over there on their bikes, stopped at the top of the stairs, and then looked down. They complained that they couldn't see anything when the guy at the front of the line started leaning forward. Nice and slow, like nothing was wrong. By the time he realized it, it was too late, and he tumbled down the stairs with his bike in tow. Strangely, although the bike was destroyed, my friend was unharmed. Seriously, not even a bruise on him. No scratches, no grazes, nothing. His clothes had a few rips and tears. That was about it. When I asked the guy in question about what happened, he said that he didn't even notice. Next thing he knew, he was tumbling down the stairs. After that, I decided to stop using those stairs, and I started going back to school every day as well. Of course, I avoided those stairs on my way there. After that, I graduated from junior high. I threw myself into studying and was just barely able to get into high school. I didn't use those stairs then either. It was around this time that I ran into my old elementary school teacher. We made small talk, and as we were chatting, those stairs suddenly flashed through my mind. I asked my old teacher about them, and his face screwed up, but he slowly started talking. First, he told me about the residential area nearby. Apparently, in order to build the houses in that area, they first had to knock down the graveyard that once existed there. They got rid of it so that they could build some houses, meaning most of the houses in that area were built on top of the old graveyard, and numerous people had had supernatural experiences there. When he visited one of his friends who lived there once, he claimed that he saw ghostly hands within just a few hours of being there. So, anyway, they moved this graveyard someplace else, which is what I'm trying to say. These stairs led up to the park, and although I'm a little late in saying this, that park was massive. Guys from the neighborhood used it for jogging, and some of the junior high clubs used it for training as well. Right at the edge of the park, away from sight, there was a small shrine, and this small shrine was split in two, right down the middle. They built a fence around it so nobody could get close. Yet, no one was ever able to find out who or what that shrine was dedicated to. As a rule, nobody was allowed to go past the fence, but somebody apparently was climbing over it and leaving offerings at the shrine every now and then, regardless. The neighborhood association apparently put out a warning not to go past the fence, but even now, someone is still going in and leaving offerings at that shrine. And near the elementary school, there's a public cemetery for people who don't have any relatives. That exists too. And there's some public housing near that where every year, without fail, someone takes their own life. This public housing area is the type of place that, even during the day, you can't let your guard down. The walls are covered in graffiti, and apparently they don't change the lights when they go out, so the whole place is kinda gloomy. As such, I don't know whether they're true or not, but there are all sorts of rumors about that place. One of my friends who lives there said that one time he opened the door and he saw a person falling from above. It made this awful noise, but when he nervously looked down, there was nothing there. Then there's the junior high. Apparently that site was the scene of a terrible battle long ago, and all the dead bodies were tossed there. People think that maybe the small shrine by the park might be in commemoration of those lost souls. Then, finally, the stairs. They were apparently built after World War II, and some young brothers died when they fell from the stairs due to their height. When I heard that, a chill ran down my spine. I mean, I had seen 2 boys on the stairs that night. It all matched up. Inside, I was scared, but I followed my old teacher towards those stairs. We climbed them and then looked around. At first, I didn't understand why, but then as I thought about all the other stories I'd heard, I suddenly got it. Straight ahead was the small shrine in the park. To the right was the public cemetery and housing area. To the left was the junior high. And behind us was the residential area that had been built on top of the graveyard. From that particular spot, we were surrounded. "They're watching us from over there," my old teacher said, pointing to a nearby mountain. There was a graveyard about halfway up. Seeing it from there was creepy. If you stepped to the side just slightly, then the houses got in the way and you couldn't see it. But from those stairs, you could see it perfectly. Apparently all of the graves that were once in this area had been moved there. And that was why they were watching us. At that moment, I remembered the junior high teachers who occasionally patrolled the area. When I asked the teacher about it, he said that once a month, on the anniversary of those boys' deaths, a teacher would patrol the area at night to make sure nothing strange happened. I said goodbye to the teacher and made my way home, unsure if I felt better or worse knowing the truth. Several days later, I decided to look into the boys' deaths. I looked on the internet and even went to the library, but I couldn't find anything. Maybe my teacher was just trying to scare me, but it all fit together too well. Maybe because it happened after the war, nothing was left behind. Maybe it was nothing more than a legend passed down over the years. Whether it's the truth or not, I still don't know. I haven't been back to the stairs since then. Maybe I was just seeing things there that night. Or maybe something really was there. But when I think about all the elementary and junior high kids still using those stairs, I get a chill. Of all the people using those stairs daily, I was the only one to sense something strange. Not even my friend who fell down the stairs sensed anything weird. But comparing it to the stories hidden behind the area, I'm confident there really is something there. My teacher said he can't see ghosts himself, but he asserted that there's definitely something in our town. And I think so too. There are all sorts of creepy stories told by Japanese soldiers, both past and present. In this next story, a current Defense Force member shares a few stories he's heard and experienced himself, and all of them are bone-chilling. Find out why in War Stories. Would you guys like to hear a scary story from a former Self-Defense Forces member? If so, I'll tell you one. This is a story I heard from an instructor in the Air Force's training unit. As you no doubt already know, many of the troops who were dispatched to Iwo Jima encountered all sorts of strange happenings. The instructor who told me this story was one of them. He was forced to cover the watch of one of the soldiers who had fallen ill. 3 of them walked around the camp with 64s in hand. As they were walking, All three of them, including the instructor, found their eyes glued to something ahead. A figure in the forest was screaming something, but they couldn't understand what. Of course, none of them believed in ghosts, so they went over to see what all the noise was about. Although the other two didn't seem like they really wanted to go. So, as they got closer, they realized that the person wasn't screaming in Japanese. A chill suddenly washed over the three of them. It was so sudden, but as they listened closer, they realized what this person was screaming. Medic! This was a word the Americans used. At the time, neither the US Armed Forces nor even any Americans in general were on the island. The three quickly realized that what they were dealing with wasn't of this world. But if this person really was calling out for aid, there was no way they could ignore it either. One member returned to camp to get assistance, while the instructor and the other member proceeded forward. They walked into an oddly open area, and the moment they got there, the screams stopped. The instructor walked around the area to see what was going on, and as he did, he stepped on something. He picked it up and looked at it, and it was a rather old, broken, foreign watch. Nearby, he found the remains of the person it presumably once belonged to. The corpse was wearing a helmet with a red cross on it. That corpse was the medic. You probably already know why that medic was holding the watch, but that watch was taken from a soldier on the verge of death. A soldier he didn't bother to save. This is nothing new on the battlefield, though. In the end, he never told me what happened to that corpse, but it was kinda depressing. And as for the voice that was calling out for the medic, the instructor said only one thing about it. That voice calling for the medic was full of anger that he had stolen his watch. Next, this is a story that happened during joint training with the ground self-defense forces. In a joint exercise between the regular base police and the ground self-defense force, A, the leader of the ground self-defense force team at the time, apparently slipped and broke his leg. He hurt himself pretty bad, breaking both his leg and injuring his arm. Of course, he left to visit the medical officer, but he soon came back. When we asked him why, he said that the medical officer told him that he was fine and to return to training. His leg was very clearly broken, yet it was the grit of the team leader A and the half-assed examination of the medical officer that scared me the most. Another story. This one happened to a fellow soldier who was on watch in the dorms after he'd returned because he'd used up all his paid vacation. I'll call him T. He was on duty at 10 p.m, walking around the base when he apparently heard something. He decided to go and check it out because it might have been an intruder. As he got closer, he realized the sound was footsteps, and by the sound of it, they were combat boots. The sound repeated over and over, and thinking that it had to be an intruder, he rushed towards the sound. But then he realized something. The footsteps were also getting closer to him. He got scared and wanted to run, but he didn't want to write an apology for neglecting his duties, so he continued towards the sound. Then he found himself face to face with the owner of the footsteps. It was fellow soldier F. He was running around barefoot. Geez, it's just F, he thought for a moment. But then F suddenly smiled at him like he'd lost his mind, and then started running circles around him. T tried to stop him, but he continued smiling as he ran around. Finally, T snapped. "Oi, cut it out!" T screamed. At that, F suddenly took off running. Once his watch was over, T set out to find F so he could give him a piece of his mind, but he couldn't. And little wonder, because F had returned to his family home at that time. When I asked how he knew it was F in the dark, he said it was because he was bald and tiny like F, and His laugh sounded just like him too. But I mean, everyone's bald in the self-defense forces. You can't exactly judge a person just from that. Our last story for this week is one that appeared in Kowabana Origins, although it has never appeared on this show before. To celebrate the new year, let's take a look back at a Nichan classic. This story was posted all the way back in 2003 and is still a favourite today. What's lurking up in the mountains? Sometimes you just never know. This one's called Tale. This is a story my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather, experienced. It's a story from the Taisho period. Long, long ago, right? For argument's sake, I'll call my great-grandfather Masao. Masao liked hunting, and whenever he was free, he went into the mountains to hunt. He used to catch wild boars and rabbits, pheasants, and so on. He was extremely proficient with his hunting rifle, and even amongst his hunting friends, he was rather famous. This mountain he went to was known for strange happenings. My grandfather heard many strange stories from Masao about it. Today, I'm going to tell you the scariest one of all. It was a crisp, clean, sunny day in May. With his hunting rifle in hand, Masao went up to the mountain alone, as he always did. His beloved dog Takeru was also with him. He was an Akita dog, by the way. Masao had a lot of experience hunting in the mountains and often went in by himself. There was a small hut on the mountain that Masao built, and his favourite pastime was to cook his hunting spoils there while having a drink. On this day, Masao set out early in the morning, but was unable to catch anything at all. It was already evening and the mountain was getting dark. I'll stick it out for one more hour, he thought, and decided to continue hunting. 30 minutes passed. Masao had mostly given up on the day's hunt, but then suddenly, a fine wild boar appeared before his eyes. She had her piglets in tow. Masao set his sights and fired, but surprised at the sudden appearance of a human, the wild boar made a quick turn and ran off up the mountain. Masao fired one more bullet, but it appeared that he had missed. His beloved dog Takeru took off after the boar. Masao followed him and ran up the steep mountainside. They chased the boar for about 15 minutes. Finally, Masao lost sight of the boar and her piglets. He was also separated from Takeru in the darkness, and he could hear him barking from far away. Relying on his dog's howls, Masao sprinted along the mountain path. About 10 minutes later, he found Takeru. He was barking furiously towards some deep thicket. Large pine trees rose into the air on either side, and it looked just like a secret entrance. Masao knew very well what it was. Amongst his hunting friends, no, amongst all the people who lived in that area, it was known as the implicitly taboo place you must never enter. Masao heard about it often from his parents when he was a child. The mountain god lives in there. If you enter carelessly, you'll be eaten. Yet for some reason, it was said that if you went even further past the forbidden area, you could interestingly catch prey there. But those who broke the law and entered that area usually went missing and were never seen again. But Takeru faced the thicket and barked his head off. The wild boar and her piglets had to be nearby. Masao succumbed to temptation and entered the forbidden zone. It was past 5 in the evening. He was somehow able to see around him with his naked eyes, but the level of light was already dangerous to be hunting in. Takeru had also stopped barking. Maybe I really should give up, Masao thought, when suddenly Takeru started barking again and broke off into a run. Masao chased after him, and about 50 meters later, Takeru dropped to his haunches, growling in a high-pitched voice as he took on a menacing stance. We've finally found her, Masao thought, and looking forward, he could see a slightly open space. A dark shadow was crouching in there, and he could hear the sound of chewing. A dreadful smell hung in the air. Masao swallowed, got down on one knee, and aimed his gun. That's not a wild boar, Masao realized. The body was too thin to be a boar, and there wasn't much hair on it. A wolf? He wondered briefly, but he'd never heard of a wolf being on the mountain before, and never seen one either. Looking closer, it was lying on the ground, eating the wild boar's piglets from earlier. Masao felt like his prey had been usurped. He pointed his rifle and tried to fire, but his finger refused to pull the trigger. No, on the contrary, his entire body was frozen. Only his back molars chattered in fear. Then, perhaps noticing Masao was there, the thing stopped eating and slowly turned its face towards him. No matter how you looked at it, that was the face of a human. Not only that though, it had the face of a 2 or 3-year-old baby. It was around 150 centimeters tall, with a body like a leopard and covered in thin fur. To put it more simply, it was like a leopard with the face of a human baby. It's a monster! Masao's terror reached its max. The thing approached him, licking its lips slick with the blood of the dead boars. It's gonna kill me. As soon as he thought it, Takeru leapt at the thing. He bit its front right leg and furiously shook his head. The creature cried just like a human baby, and with its left leg scratched at Takeru's nose. For a moment, Masao was dumbfounded, but he came back to himself and realized he was able to move again. He fired a single bullet. It misfired. Oh, come on! Masao never failed to maintain his gun, and before setting out for the day, had checked it thoroughly. He pulled again. Another misfire. While he battled with the rifle, the thing bit Takeru's neck. Takeru let out a pathetic cry. Lost in the moment, Masao grabbed the hatchet attached to his belt and slashed the creature's back. The thing screamed like a cat in heat before biting Takeru's neck again. Masao swung his hatchet once more and chopped off the creature's tail. The thing screamed, disappearing even further into the forest. Masao stood there for a while, shocked, only coming back when he heard the pained breaths of Takeru beside him. There were teeth marks just like those of a human in his neck. He was bleeding, but it wasn't very deep, so Masao disinfected the wound and wrapped a cloth around it. He seemed able to walk on his own, but he couldn't guarantee that thing wouldn't attack them again while he was limping back. Masao hurried back down the mountain path with Takeru. Finally, the mountain cabin came into sight. From there, it was less than 30 minutes back to the village. Relieved, Masao picked up the pace even more. About 15 minutes past the cabin, Masao started to think something was strange. He felt like they were running in circles. Masao had been playing in that area since he was a child and never once gotten lost, so he couldn't believe it. He was filled with a fear he couldn't describe. He descended even faster. Another 15 minutes passed. No way. The mountain cabin was before him again. Masao was confused, but he thought he must have taken a wrong turn somewhere because he was so scared. He once more started walking down the same path he always took, but was immediately met with despair. He was back at the mountain cabin again. Takeru was breathing heavily, and the cloth around his neck was soaked with blood. Although he didn't want to, Masao decided that they would spend the night in the cabin. It was past 8 p.m. by the time Masao entered the cabin. He was overwhelmed with relief, tiredness, and hunger and threw himself down on the floor. Then he thought about that creature he'd just encountered. Maybe that really was the mountain god. He was unable to stop his body from trembling, and so he started drinking the shochu he kept in the cabin. He had some preserved smoked fish on him, but he had trouble eating it. He gave some to Takeru, who happily swallowed it. "I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight, huh?" Masao thought. He propped his rifle up against his shoulder and decided to spend the night on watch. Masao woke up at the sound of something being dragged outside. He was both tired and a little tipsy, so at some point he had fallen asleep. When he looked at the clock, it was past 1 a.m. The sound was coming from the roof. Takeru was also awake and growling quietly. Masao unconsciously grabbed his rifle. "No way. That thing is here," he wondered. He didn't have the courage to go outside, so he gripped his rifle and simply stared at the ceiling. He heard the sound of claws on the roof for close to 10 minutes, and then finally it stopped. It was like a nightmare without end. Even though the noise stopped, Masao continued staring at the roof. Then, a short while later, he heard what sounded like people whispering outside. "Ayo. Moo." Masao listened closer, despite his body trembling with fear. Then Takeru started barking furiously. He heard something on the roof and the sound of something heavy being dropped to the ground below. Takeru started barking at the door. Who is it?" Masao screamed without thinking. He aimed his rifle at the door. The scratching sound stopped, and he heard the clear voice of a human child on the other side. "Tail! Tail!" It was the thing. Masao shuddered. His back teeth chattered. "What do you want?" Takeru continued barking. "Tail! Tail! Give me back my tail!" The thing answered him clearly with human words. Unable to stand it anymore, Masao fired a shot at the door. "Gah!" He heard a strange scream from the other side, and then fired a second and third shot. Bloodshot eyes looked in through the holes in the door. "Tail! Tail! Give me back my tail!" the thing said again with a voice that sounded just like a human child. "I don't know anything about your tail. Go away!" Masao went to fire again, but his body froze. "Tail! Tail! Give me back my tail!" The thing repeated itself over and over, like a broken tape recorder. I don't know where it is. Leave me alone." "Tail! Tail! Give me back my tail!" Once more the thing looked through the holes in the door with crazed, bloodshot eyes, scratching at the wood. "It wasn't me. I don't know anything about your tail. Go away!" Masao screamed, his body stiff. "No! You cut it!" The creature screamed and smashed its way through the door. Masao's memory of what happened after that was intermittent. A child's face that broke through the door, crazed, bloodshot eyes, sharp claws on its forelegs, pain on his own face like burning, Takeru sent flying by the thing, shooting at the creature in a daze. When he came back to, he was in a hospital bed in the village. He was in a coma for 3 straight days. He had lacerations on the left side of his face thanks to the creature. His right leg was broken and his body was covered in scratches. He was in a bad way. All Masao told the other villagers was that he was attacked by a bear. Yet, it seemed they understood what really happened to him anyway, and after what happened, Masao was ostracized. He soon moved to Tokyo, got married, and my grandfather was born. By the way, Masao supposedly told my grandfather this story 3 days before he died of lung cancer. All I'll say is that it took place deep in the mountains somewhere in Wakayama Prefecture. As for his beloved dog Takeru, he was discovered dead on top of Masao, like he was trying to protect him until the end. His flesh and bones were intact, but for some reason, not a single internal organ was left. His insides were cleanly removed. A big shout out and thank you to this week's Kami tier member on YouTube, Jojo. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to chat about this week's stories, don't forget to join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.